Welcome to the No Script Show. I would like to start off today's episode by thanking my co host and everyone else for rotating me back to the intro just in time for Black History Month. Let's get it gone.
Is that this month?
It is this month, indeed. Let's hit the shit on.
So this is the only month in which there is Black History, and the other 11 months, what, it just doesn't
Yeah,
exist.
like nothing. Like I can't wait. Like I want to track like all like I know this is the lowest common denominator subject to go in on, but I
Right.
want to track the Pornhub searches for Ebony during Black History.
They probably do that. They probably already have like their research team planning to do that shit. So yeah, okay, okay. Damn, dude. This is also, I think today is like the 29-year anniversary or something crazy of the day that the NP announced that the ANC was unbanned and that Nelson Mandela would be released from jail. So that is the one bit of Black history that I know. 2nd of February every year. So yeah, and obviously this is when all the political parties are doing their manifesto launches. So
Yeah, which is awesome. Like I love that shit.
oh my God, have you seen that there's a party, ICOSA, that wants to bring back mandatory military conscription in South Africa?
Okay, but why?
So that kids get jobs. Like, that was their pitch. I'm just like, dude, no. That's
I
not.
mean, I come from a family that has seen a enormous amount of military service,
Yeah.
and I seriously considered it myself for a very long time. And I have relatives both still living and who have passed on in the line of duty, and even I'm like, why?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like one of these, and I hate using racial descriptors, but they are still relevant in South Africa, sadly. It's a Cape Colored party, basically. And this one, it's like this old guy who I'm pretty sure served in the military himself. And he's like, our kids need to like find meaningful work and discipline in their lives. And so obviously the solution is to send them to the military. And it's like, whoa, slow down. Slow
I'm
down.
gonna sound very right wing here when I go in and say, how about we just teach the fathers to stick around in those?
Oh, shit.
How's that for start on discipline and jobs, huh?
No, yeah, no kidding. Like, it's just, well, if you want the military to be your dad, I guess.
See, that's the thing, because that's on a fundamental level, that's the problem with this whole situation, is that with the welfare state and with military service, you're essentially taking out fathers and you're replacing them with the government. The government will be your breadwinner. The government will be your discipliner. These are
Yeah.
roles traditionally served by the father,
Yep.
and
And it's just like, it's amazing how that's a right wing position. I'm just like, that's the normal biological position. That's where kids come from. This is not controversial.
I've just accepted that I'm now a right winger. So like that's why I prefaced it with that. So
Yeah,
like,
yeah. No,
yeah.
I'm both alt right and transphobic, according to the people that try to label me. So I'm cool with it, Like
Yeah.
I I'm pretty sure I have more trans friends than these people, but I'm transphobic. So good job.
You know what? It's because we retweeted Roman. Shout out to Roman Kadnak. Thanks for making us alt right now.
There was I posted something one day and it's like I just within like 20 minutes I came back to it and like Twitter notifications retweeted by Germ and Robin Kevin. I'm like, oh fuck, today I'm on the alt right. That's what's happening. So I didn't want to start the day this way, but there it is, all the same. No, dude. So I really don't want to talk politics, but that is literally what's happening today. It's like the ANC, the EFF, they're all out there.
Yeah.
Props to Ramaphosa for rolling out the same script this year that they did the last 5 elections. We will now stamp out corruption. Like, good job, guys.
Consistency is key, bro. Consistency is key. Let's not like all the things you can slander against ANC, you can't say they're inconsistent.
You know what? I will grant you that. They have stuck remarkably well to the founding ideology of their movement. Like, that has not wavered once. Like, in the face of Concord rulings and criminal charges and all sorts of shit, it doesn't matter. They just keep going. Like, I respect that in the way I respect a train crash, right? It's
Correct.
kind of like momentum in progress. It's beautiful to watch.
Yeah,
Even
yeah.
though it kills everyone.
It's kind of like that kid that's in school who's not very bright and he keeps, getting taken out on the rugby field by the same tackle over and over again. But you got to admire his determination to get up time and time again. That's the point that they find themselves at right now.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Then I don't know if you've watched any of the clips that the SABC has been posting of the EFF's manifesto launch. The People's
No, I'm
Manifesto.
trying to remain in a happy space, Logan.
The funny thing is, it's like okay, politics 101 is you tell the crowds what they want to hear regardless of what you do in the background, right? There's no reason to be consistent. It is not the optimal strategy to actually have integrity in politics. And a lot of this stuff, it's like, I honestly find myself agreeing with a bunch of stuff Malema says, just knowing that also I'd never vote for the man because look at what they do with the power they get. And look at where they're trying to lead us. But the one was just, they don't want a state-regulated media, but they also want the media to step out of politics. Because, and he made a very valid point, the moment the media starts taking political sides, they become politicians. And now it's like they have access to this platform which is meant to be neutral. And I'm looking at that and going, you're talking about Adrian Basson, aren't you? Like that's just a...
Oh, that's sad. That's sad. That's just like the saddest breakup on the internet ever. Like,
it is sad
like, because he
puppy
wrote
emoji.
like this whole love letter. He's like, I used to be best friends. I used to send him tips to you.
It's like, you used to call me on the telephone.
Logan, edit the Drake lyrics. Yes. Used to call late night when you need my love. Exactly. I know when that hotline blings, it can only mean one thing.
Shock, surprise, Malema is a politician, and journalists...
I think the Basson-Malema breakup is our generation's version of the Jennifer Aniston-Brad Pitt breakup. Like, that's what they...
So now we just need to close the loop with a Shania Twain, you don't impress me much about one of them. And then we're done, like culturally. You've come full circle.
You can wrap that chapter up and ship it into the annals of history.
Damn. All right, so Black History Month. Who are your heroes? Do you have like a hero or an event or a moment that sort of stands out for you?
In terms of which field?
Well,
science, what, like...
Well, so okay, Black History Month, right? I mean, I know that it exists as a thing, but is it literally just like remembering, like, what does it actually honor? I guess is the question.
Okay, so, and I'm going to really simplify this and distill it down, but the whole point of it was, in the wake of Black people being emancipated in the United States, in the wake of general freedom movements of Black people throughout the world, Black History Month, more specifically in the United States, was about having Black people honor these historical figures so that Black people as a group can find pride in themselves again and find self-worth that, hey, we are part of the American story and we have value. We have contributed and we've done, great things.
Okay. So is there like any one in particular that like sort of stands out for you? Because I mean, I know there's, in terms of these heroes, right? Like you've got Rosa Parks is basically credited with starting one of those like passive resistance movements by refusing to sit in the back of the bus. There's that.
I'm going to start out local and I'm going to get mountains of flack for this.
Do it.
But because he's a communist. But Chris Hani is one of my favorite members in Black history. The old SACP Communist Party leader. And this is why, because he predicted today, he said, my fear is that one day the revolutionary leaders will become fat cats themselves, driving BMWs in the city. And look what they've become. Honestly, this is my belief. Had he been alive today, the SACP would be a more principled party, and it would be less of a vote feeder to the ANC, because that's what they are now.
And that's it's the funniest thing. Like a photo was tweeted recently. I think the team that South Africa sent to Davos, and it was, South Africa's trade and industry team. You've got Rob Davies, like the hardcore communist, on the trade delegation to Davos, and I'm like, how is that working out for you guys? But the thing is, the principal part is right. I mean, I'm also no communist, but even I respect people that stick for their principles if they believe, what they do. So,
Chris Hani. Yeah. Chris Hani, he's one of those guys who I would think is less less prone to falling to champagne socialism than others.
Yeah.
Like I think he was a very principled man. And now this is like, just put your tinfoil hats on now for a second. This is my conspiracy behind his death.
Right.
Is that somebody in the ANC, somebody who's still alive today in the ANC, who is high ranking enough, sent, because remember, his assassin has never said who sent him.
Okay, so hang on, like back up a sec. So he was assassinated, right? Like that's actually
Yes.
how he
By some Polish dude. What is it with the Poles and like people from that area of the world, like the Poles, the Soviets? Who assassinated Archduke Ferdinand of World War I? Serbian, Poles, Soviets, people from that block. And assassinating people. Like, what's the deal?
I think it must be people like post-Russian occupation in World War II that just don't give a fuck in general. They will go anywhere and shoot anyone.
It's either them or people with three first names who become assassins. No, seriously. It's either like Sergey whatever, or whatever the dude who assassinated.
Isn't like Robert, like Harvey Lee Oswald or something?
Harvey Oswald. John
Right.
Wilkes Booth. It's always those three name motherfuckers or somebody from the Eastern Bloc. One or the two. So if you find a Sergei Vladimir Kisov, know that he's assassin for sure. Like there's like done and dusted. Like,
Just to start by arresting everyone with two first names, and then you're already cut down on the assassin market. Good God. Okay, so yeah, no, honestly, it wouldn't surprise me, like all that shit in the background, right? I mean,
yeah, like somebody sent him to take out Chris, and they're like, cool, now the SSCP will be our vote feeder. And
it's the thing is, it's actually interesting because I've recently, for reasons that I can't quite remember right now, actually read up on the history of the SSCP in South Africa and sort of their attempts at a communist revolution, like way back in like the 1800s, like leading up to the land, the 1914 Land Act. Like that was like one of the big kind of things that disrupted it. And like the Communist Party was active back then. And what's interesting is that they found ideological alliance of a sort in the ANC, but you could tell that they couldn't get their principles through. Like the movement grew and they supported the ANC that early, but I think they were intending on eventually having some principled leadership and actually standing as a real force in South African politics, and then they just never panned out that way. So now, like you said, they're a vote feeder. Between them and the unions, that's basically who keeps the ANC in power. So, yeah, but
Exactly.
but it is sad. I mean, as much as I'm a free market capitalist guy, I genuinely believe you do need principled opposition in all debates, because that's how you find the edges of sort of the discussion, and that's how you keep things balanced. You can't just have everything be free market or nothing. That just doesn't work either. America is a good example of that. Capitalism run rampant. So
it's corporatism run rampant.
That is actually the thing, right? So there was I can't remember the year now, but business and
That's
government.
not capitalism. That's corporatism run
Exactly,
rampant.
corporatism. Yeah, no, and it's a good name for it. So it's just like in the last couple of days, for some reason, I've ended up in a bunch of arguments with actual socialists and the difference between welfare and socialism and all the rest. But there's an interesting thing that happened, because business and government in the US never got along up until like some point in the 1800s, where there was a school of thought that basically said, you know what? Business should leverage its ability to manipulate government to secure their legacy or something like that. There was a white paper that was written for a chamber of business somewhere, and that set in wheels the motion for businesses actually buying politicians and using that to secure their dominance. So America as it exists today is actually a failed capitalist experiment, in that the moment they went political, it became something completely different. But they still call it capitalism. So now you look at what is corporatism or crony capitalism or whatever that is, and it's like, oh, there's these horrible things that happen, therefore free markets are bad and we must have state intervention. And it's like, oh boy, you're at the start of a very long journey of trying to understand all these things. It's not that simple. But yeah, so all of that being said, ultimately, yes, I think the world would be better with people like Chris Hani still around. Even though I might disagree on what he says, at least he's saying it,
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I do have a living Black History person I'm a fan of, and that's Thomas Sowell. Like, I'm gonna be super sad when that guy dies, because like I'm gonna live to see that guy dying.
Can I be honest and say that until I actually saw him in an interview, I was convinced he was white based purely on what he said, like as an economist. Like, I'm going to be honest and say, Thomas Sowell, he must be a white guy.
I appreciate your honesty.
And it's like always, as you see him in quotes and other people talk about Thomas Sowell changed my thinking. And then it's like I saw an interview with someone like interviewing Thomas Sowell, and I was confused for a second. I'm like, hold on, you're black. Wait a second. And then it's like, no, he is.
I get the same thing all the time when people hear me over the phone and then actually meet me.
Yeah, it's like, huh. No, but and that's the thing. It's like that was one of the things that kind of opened my eyes to the fact that good ideas can be found everywhere. There's no direct correlation between where you come from and what you believe. I think most things that he's ever kind of argued, I've had to agree with. And it's also what's difficult for me is that there's an account somewhere on Twitter that tweets Thomas Sowell quotes. But for some reason, it tweets it as if he's already dead in the same fashion that people tweet like Albert Einstein quotes or Richard Feynman quotes. So he's still around. That's the part that blows my mind. He has a legacy of work as if he was dead, and he's still around. But yeah, no, definitely a worthy hero for sure.
Yeah. So that's for this week. I'll have like a hero for each week. How about that?
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, as much as I think the idea of decolonial education is dangerous, there's a thing.
I just think it's stupid. I don't think it's dangerous. I just think it's stupid.
It's stupid, but unfortunately, this is a thing in France, which I find utterly amazing because they were the actual colonizers. There is a decolonial education movement in France. I know.
No, honestly, how is the number 0 colonial? How is like Pythagorean theory?
Gravity. How is gravity colonial? Tell me that shit.
You know, how are basic chemical reactions colonial? Those reactions existed before any of us existed. We're talking about fundamental forces of the fucking universe, and you somehow.
For some reason, the phrase "racist sodium" just popped into my head. Like, that's not a thing.
I mean, can you not? It's so stupid to me. Like, I can sort of, if we're gonna grasp at straws, I can sort of see where their point is when it comes to colonial history, right?
Yep.
Like, history is written by the winners, so that could be decolonialized per se. You could give a different spin to that. You could say have this extra say was cut out from the narrative. This perspective was cut out from the narrative. Mm-hmm. But physical science, mathematics. What?
There is an actual.
Or they'll say, how do we know who is? And I mean, if you really want to stretch it, let's say they want to check who first discovered Pythagorean theorem. I don't give a fuck. It exists. We figured it out. Let's move on, guys.
I know. And that's the thing. It's like there was, and this is a real thing you can search. UCT #gravity must fall. That was that was amazing. For those who don't know the clip, there was
the single most I actually got rejected from UCT when I was doing my undergrad applications. I think it's hilarious that an institution that has somebody like that on their boards is like rejected me like that. Sorry, that was my ego kicking in.
So the story, long story short, there was a couple of humanities students who for some reason ended up in front of the engineering faculty and argued that science was like too colonial. And one of the things, there was a student who was like, explain the science of how witchcraft can summon lightning bolts. And it's like, that doesn't work. And then someone else is like, gravity is a Western construct. And there was some engineering student who just popped up, that's not true. And the thing that bothers me about that clip is like this engineering student, he's like, well, that's not true. He calls it out. And like immediately the moderator shuts down the discussion. Like, we don't say things like that here. All perspectives are valid. And I'm like, oh, fuck, here we go. This is like proper leftism. But what came out of that was reject Western modernity. That was their thing. It's like, Western science is wrong.
Tweeted from my iPad.
Fuck. And the thing is, you can tell she was trolling, right? Because the moment she got a rise out of the audience, you could see on her face, like, yes, she won a victory. She was very happy about the pushback. So it's like she's trolling. She's out there just winning points for her side. No care about anything. And I look at that and I go, okay, I really don't like the fact that this is where it's going. all of that being said, and something that still bothers me to this day is the fact that there are two South Africas, and we mostly know the history of the one that starts in 1652 when the Dutch colonists arrived. Not much is spoken about the history of when the Zulus trekked in and pushed all the other tribes ahead of them. And there's like this whole other side to South African history from the perspective of the people that were conquered that is not being told. And that, I think, is wrong, and we need to fix that.
But believe me, Botswana know the story. We know
I'm
the
sure.
story. As a Botswana myself, we have a very interesting story to tell the rest of you guys. Like, the history of South Africa was very different from our perspective.
Exactly. And it's like, you got people today who they got taught history in like private schools, and that history focused on, the colonists arriving. And it's like, okay, but you do realize that not only were all these people defeated in battle and their lands taken and dished out and all the rest, but they're still here, right? It's not like you can just pretend this didn't happen. And so I think urgently people need to understand that there is a whole other side to this, because it blows my mind. There are people in my circles who see nothing wrong in South Africa. Like, still to this day, it's like, well, everything is fine. And it's like, do you not understand the country you're living in? So
No, it's cool. We actually didn't have our land taken. We have a whole country. It's called Botswana. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's really
a few
great.
times. Yeah. I believe it's like somewhere north of Angola, right? Which is like where Lesotho is.
There.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Sorry, there was an experiment once. Some like rational blog or something, that they did a thing where they asked people, like off the streets in the US. I think it was during the Crimea thing. They asked people to point out on a map where Crimea was, and they also asked them a bunch of questions to gauge how much they understood about the world. And they found an inverse correlation between a knowledge of geopolitics and where people thought Crimea was, meaning the dumber you were, the more they thought it was just everywhere in the world. So the map has pins everywhere. Australia, New York State, everywhere, for like where this one country is. And it's like, okay, Americans don't know that much about foreign policy. That much is obvious. But even in South Africa, I think there is that same level of ignorance, actually. There's people that don't know the
and it's less excusable in South Africa, because at least in America, your average state is the size of your average country in Europe. So geographically, they or just, okay, it's 80% the size of your average country in Europe, with exceptions for states like Florida, Texas, New York, fine. But most of them, your average state is fucking massive, and with its own capital, with its like, as you and I both know, we've been there enough times to realize, like, that's the thing. You don't realize this about the United States until you go there, till you realize, people outside looking in be like, oh, how can this state do this against the government? You guys do not realize the level of complexity there. So in that context, I'm almost more willing to forgive the Americans for being geographically not so aware, because they have enough of their own shit to deal with, just realizing the state capital of, let's say, Wyoming and its neighbors than, South Africa, which is, come on, guys.
Yep. No, it's actually, it's like united in name only, almost. I mean, the US is only united in as far as they have a federal government, but like state to state, they're like different countries. No, I'm well familiar with this.
You get some uniformity. Like the Midwest, places around the Great Lakes, those states tend to get along well, except for Michigan and Ohio. But, wow, those two states hate each other.
I love that there's these rivalries, like it's like it's one country, but also the states really don't like each other sometimes.
Oh, well, I mean, there was literally a Michigan-Ohio war. Those two states went to war with each other over like some river dispute, like lake area river dispute. And that's translated now down to like their average college football game is like considered like a proxy for that war. Like, it's insane, dude.
I totally get that though. Like, just like they are the enemy, right? We have to go after the enemies. I totally get that.
Google like Michigan State versus Ohio State football. It's like it's insane.
It is.
So yeah.
All right. So anyway, it's not like we actually have a topic or anything. We're just meandering at this point. I'm processing the week still, because like personally for me, this was like the most difficult week of the year so far. I mean, January has been the longest year in 2019.
Yeah, it has.
That's how it feels.
You're probably having a better January than Ralph Northam.
Okay, let's talk about Ralph Northam, because I'm going to be honest and say I have no idea what this story is about.
He's the governor of Virginia.
Right.
And for those who don't understand American politics, governors are like, okay, each state has congressmen or statesmen, I think, and you have a Democrat and a Republican statesman. So each state has two. And then the governor is like the president of your state.
Yeah.
And Ralph Northam, I love it. Like the hot takes on Twitter are delicious because like the Democrat sort of candidates like Kamala Harris, who were in love with this guy ages ago. They were all like, he's so great, such a cool guy, all that. So recently, just in time for Black History Month, a photo surfaced of Democrat Governor Ralph Northam in his medical yearbook, and it's him and a buddy. One is in blackface, and the other is dressed up as a Klansman from the KKK. It's unconfirmed currently whether he's the Klansman or the KKK member. I mean, the Klansman or the guy in blackface.
Yeah.
Here's the things here, okay? What I love about the situation, firstly, just in time for Black History Month, amazing. And people have like extracted the like Kamala Harris and the rest of them praising this guy, and they're like, this tweet didn't age well. So firstly, just in time for Black History Month. Yeah. And secondly, what I also love about it is people are literally having a debate as to what's worse, if he's the KKK man or the blackface. Who cares? Who cares?
Oh my god, that is bad. That is bad.
Am I the only one that thinks this is legitimately insane that you're arguing which one's worse?
You know what? There's a lot of this stuff that makes absolutely no sense.
Yes. Okay. Let's assume that it's better that he was in blackface. Okay. So does this go away now? Is this okay now?
Yes, no.
And you know what? It's in his high school yearbook. I mean, not high school yearbook. His medical college yearbook, graduate yearbook.
Yeah.
And normally I wouldn't care, but let's be honest. The left has pushed the conversation to the point where anything you did at any point in time in any context can and will be used against you. So in the interest of fairness, let's apply their standards to one of their own and say, well, he was in blackface at that point, so.
And that's, you know what? There's like this. Okay, the world. I just, for one thing, that's a bold look. Like, just I don't even have to see the photo to just imagine it. But what year was this taken? I mean, if this is his medical school thing, this would have been years ago, right?
Yeah, the dude's like pushing 60, I think. I don't know. I don't know how old he is.
So we're talking like 1970, maybe.
Yeah, like Ralph. He wouldn't be mistaken for someone's father. He's a man of age.
So the one thing is that
he's 59. My bad.
Okay, well, it's fine. Next year he'll be 60 or dead. Yeah. Who knows? And then this podcast will be technically accurate, just with inevitable passage of time. But there is this thing where, okay, so I mention it obliquely every now and then, but one of my core interests ever is communication, just as it pertains to the evolution of civilization. And as communication is sped up, it feels like time is speeding up. And I don't think that's a false thing. We have so much information to process every day, it exhausts us, right? Far more than anyone had to process 100 years ago. And somehow between that and the ability of a malicious hive mind to dig up and amplify anything bad ever, that sets up the preconditions for what is literally becoming the second dark age, because I don't like what the left is doing with this. You know, people make mistakes, they fuck up, and if the right has one thing, the Christian right, if they got one thing correct, it's grace and forgiveness and reconciliation and moving forward. That shit is important because we all fuck up, but we're all trying to do our best at the end of the day. The left doesn't care. Like, the fact that they'll dig up like a 40-year-old photo and use that in a race now, it's just, then at that point, you've got no principles, no ideas, no vision, nothing for the future you can argue on. All you can do is take someone else out based on something that it doesn't even matter how much they apologize for it, there it is. You know, it's insane to me. That is objectively insane. And it's not a good sign. It really fucking is not a good sign that we're having this conversation. Yeah. So, dude, I'm a little bit annoyed Okay, a little bit annoyed. I've
Tilt
been,
levels at 2 out of 10.
I've been touched on my studio, which is like 7 out of 10. On there's a YA Twitter, right? So do you know what YA Twitter is?
No, but I'm worried that your tilt is at 7 out of 10. This cannot be good, but proceed.
Young adult. So it's a genre in writing like young adult novels, like high school shit. Kids in like high school and college. So why?
So like
It's a genre. It's like you got horror,
Maze Runner and those sort of things.
yeah, like that sort of shit, right?
Divergent, those sort of
Exactly.
novels and stuff.
Exactly. That comes from it's young adult. It's like the genre,
Okay.
and young adult Twitter is the people that write and defend these books. They have undeveloped frontal lobes. I swear to God. So there was a story recently where this kid immigrated from China. She's full up Chinese, and she grew up in an actual oppressive regime. Like we're talking preconditions for Ayn Rand sort of thing. Like she knows what oppression looks like. She wrote a young adult novel, which included like a magic system, and it included like her perspective on oppression based on race and class and that sort of thing. And I'm like, that's a pretty good book to write, especially because her whole thing is like smashing that system. Nothing wrong with that. She got so hammered for this because she's a person of color who shows other people of color in a bad light, and this and that and the next thing. Next thing you know, she preemptively pulled her book from the shelf. It was written, edited, ready to be published, and she got her publisher to stand down over a controversy for a book that hasn't even been released yet.
You've got to be kidding me.
I am not making this up. I'm definitely going to link to the story like on the podcast page and everything, because that is ridiculous. And now the stories evolve even more today. And there's a tweet, and I've put it up on my timeline, I'm sure. One of the other YA authors who led the charge, she tweeted something about, color blindness is very, very, what's it? Color blindness is tone deaf.
Yes.
Yeah, and then and then she retweets it, like, I apologize for using tone deaf as an ableist slur. And I'm like, okay, you're fucking stupid, because tone deaf has nothing to do with your ability to perceive sound. So obviously you don't know what the fuck you're doing. As of right
also,
now,
isn't colorblindness an ableist slur?
that would be even worse, but no apology for that. So then she got so hammered that her account is now locked and private on Twitter. So like everyone pushed back, because she was apparently one of the main bullies who got this Chinese girl to pull her book before it was written. Now I'm like, this is worse than book burning. This is like a new level of pre-suppression. This is stupid.
Yeah, this isn't even book burning. This is idea burning now. Like,
It is.
just the idea for existing.
And I'm like, and what blows my mind is that you've got this Chinese kid who has lived it. She has actual tangible experience in something. Her perspective would definitely add to the conversation, no matter how problematic you think the work is. But it gets pulled regardless. And it's a bunch of teenagers, by the way. YA is people like, 16 to 25 normally. It's these people who have managed to mob this poor girl out of her career. This was her debut novel. Out of her career, she's done. And I'm just like, this cannot be the standard. I'm sorry. This is Dark Ages shit. This is not what Enlightenment stands for. So,
Wow, that is.
I know.
I'm just trying. I'm gonna take. Yeah, I'm struggling to process that. Wow.
Yeah. Look, I've seen authors mobbed before for work that kind of comes out. And like, there's a lot of shit that happens, like a white man pretends to be a black woman to sell a book about black women. And there's this whole kind of meta game around pen names and fake identities, because sometimes, like even J.K. Rowling writes as Robert Galbraith to sell a different kind of book entirely different from Harry Potter. It's a common thing. If you have an audience that knows what to expect from you, but you want to experiment, you invent new pen names. That has become a whole other thing of like cultural appropriation now. And it's like, already this is a big enough problem on its own before you shut down an immigrant who has written about her own fucking experiences. Like, I can't process. Like, for me, that's crossing the line completely. If you want to if you want to take down, like, if J.K. Rowling, right, pretends to be a black woman and writes some like African magic novel, right, and she gets slated for that, fair enough, right? She has an established career. She knew what she was doing. She took the risk. Maybe it didn't pay off. Cool. But to do that to like a teenager from another country, that's just no. So at that.
Oh, that is just.
So actually, without even realizing it, we are in the middle of a cultural crusade playing out on social media, where other voices are being actively silenced in service to an ideology which is cancerous, and this is the new normal. This is the Dark Ages. This is exactly how the fuck it looked in the Dark Ages. So just surprise, here we are.
I'm really struggling. Like, I'm just trying to stare into the. I'm really struggling to understand.
I can tell. So think like
Wow.
next week we can pick it up again. But that's my touch me on my studio story for this week. Like I can't believe this happened.
I
Yeah.
I don't know, like I'm perplexed. Like when you just like when you
Yep.
see like you run into an event that your mind legitimately has no reference point as to how to process it. That's how I'm feeling right now. It probably shows on my face, but I'm just
Yep.
wow. I see.
It's like
It's not anger. It's not fear. It's just pure
like what? Yeah.
stunned,
Yeah.
completely shut down. I'm like, what?
Yeah. And it's like I can't actually believe we've gotten to this point. Like and like my favorite thing was so that like people have jumped in and started saying like this is like book burning because it is. You're preventing the book from being read. And the other people are like, no, all these people are just using their freedom of speech, protesting the idea. And it's like there's a big fucking difference between freedom of speech and mobbing somebody into submission. Those are two very different things. Freedom of speech is what the Chinese girl was supposed to have, publishing her book against the grain of the authority of the time. That is freedom of speech. The freedom to mob somebody off the web, that's harassment, So it's just like, it's amazing. These concepts have just become convoluted, and you've got these people who have formed these like attack mobs on the internet now. And the moment you piss them off, the hive mind will come for you in a very real way. And it's like, again, I'm almost okay with it so long as the hive mind is attacking each other because they deserve it. I'm a lot less okay with this in this situation where it's like this kid did nothing wrong and was attacked for it anyway. Like just do. But also, yeah, apologizing for tone deaf. Like that is tone deaf. That is like the meta joke of like, how are you even publishing books? What are in your books?
Do people think tone deaf means you literally can't hear because it has the word deaf in it? Because that's what we call deaf, not tone deaf. Tone deaf is a qualifier on deaf, meaning something like deaf, not quite.
Deaf.
Like even if I didn't know what tone was, just by that qualifier being in front of the word deaf, I would infer immediately that it's something like deaf, but not quite.
It's like colorblind is not blind. If it was blind, you'd call it blind. Like it's not even, you don't even need to know the language to know that the qualifier changes the meaning. It's just, tone deaf is the DA putting up a billboard of the Morikana victims without checking with the families. That's tone deaf, right? That has fuck all to do with the listening. No, dude, I don't know. It's like, so anyway, like my whole thing being communication and culture, this worries me because the new wave of communication is participatory social media, and what's forming on it unchecked are these Wild West mobs. It's like as lynchings. This is like honestly Wild West type shit. So like whenever something comes along that attempts to like regulate this and bring real world laws into it, I'm excited because that means we'll tame this thing before it does any more damage. Because I still think there's a lot of damage ahead. Yeah, no, dude, it does. I mean, and this is before you get to the fact that the same sort of mob over the years has slowly and reliably purged a whole lot of American classics from like school bookshelves and stuff. Like they're just like J.D. Salinger novels, for instance. Like they're becoming progressively harder to find, even though he's a great American novelist. Catcher in the Rye, for instance, because it has the scene with the kid and the prostitute, all of a sudden it's like we can't have our kids read this, and it's like, okay, you don't understand how culture works.
Exactly, and also, I'm sorry, the Catcher in a Rye is inappropriate, but what's his name, Desmond, whatever, the 11-year-old kid as trans drag queen kid.
Oh, dude, oh my god,
that's acceptable, but Catcher in the Rye is not.
I don't. It's like so that's
11-year-old drag.
Yeah. Okay. So
in gay bars being tipped, like that's okay, but Catcher in the Rye is not.
So for anyone confused by the story, okay, we all know what beauty pageants are, and they're sort of maybe like you could call them slightly problematic for like teenagers and up because it's all about their looks and like whatever. That's fine.
Problematic. It helped me through puberty. It's not. It's the opposite of problematic.
It solved the problem for you.
Yeah.
So it
solved a lot of problems for me.
Oh yes. It gets progressively creepier when parents force their 12 and 13-year-olds to do this, and there's like a whole thing on like the TLC
Pageant
channel.
Kids. That's what it's called. Was it on what channel is it?
It's TLC normally. It's like they carry that shit.
Yeah, sorry. Continue.
Yeah. No, so it's like already like parents who kind of manipulate their kids into doing beauty pageant stuff. That for me is child abuse. Okay. But now it's gone even further. There's this 11-year-old kid who somehow decided before puberty that he was gay, then decided that he liked to perform for people, so somehow he ended up at actual gay bars, actually performing for adults. I don't know what the performances entailed. That doesn't matter. What matters is the media coverage was positive. They're like, this is like a little gay hero, basically. Like smashing barriers and changing perceptions. And I'm
drag hero, and
I'm like, okay, hold on. Short of actually fucking children, what exactly is this kid standing for? Because I don't see anything wholesome about this. Like, this is what you start crusades over. This shit. Like, that shouldn't happen once. Like,
exactly. Let's put the shoe on the other foot, right? Imagine if this was a little girl.
Yeah.
And she was performing for a bunch of old white men in a strip bar.
They would burn the town. They would like set fire to the actual building. Like,
why is this okay? I'm like, what the fuck? Regardless of your sexual orientation, your political, this is not okay. This is a child. They do not have the mental capacity to process what's going on, to make these decisions.
You know what? And this is why I was called the transphobe. There was a related argument that I had where, so call me whatever you want. I think that it's a bit weird that we've kind of edited puberty out of the narrative. It's normal for people to go through a very scary transition where they don't know who they are as their hormones kick in, which alters their behavior and their perspectives and shit. That's normal. It sucks, but that is what human beings do. The trans acceptance movement has kind of edited that out completely. They're now deciding that gender is prescriptive. They can decide what your gender is. And already that's a concept I don't really have a problem with that for people that have already like decide for themselves, right? Like they feel a certain way, they want to identify as who they feel as. That's great. Do it as much as you want. I have a problem when parents force their kids to do this because kids haven't developed yet to the point where they know what they're signing off on. So the actual thing that I got in trouble for, which I'll fucking say it again, is that I don't think it's responsible to prescribe gender conversion therapy to a prepubescent child. Bottom
Agreed.
fucking line, that like, wait for them to go through puberty, then do it. Baseline, right? That's fine. But prepubescent is where I draw the line. Like, that is creepy as fuck. That is a parent pushing way more than their ideology on their kids. Especially because kids cannot mount a sophisticated defense against it. They trust what their parents tell them. They're the authority figures in their lives. So it's like, anyway, that got me nailed as a transphobe. And as part of that whole conversation...
But, I mean, how, though? How in the fuck?
I don't know. But as part of the conversation, my argument was, in a legal sense and in a biological sense, I don't believe children that young are capable of consent. Meaning, in a legal sense, they're not old enough, but they're also incapable of grasping the gravity of the change, the gravity of the thing they're being put through. They're being told this is a good thing, and they're just buying that at face value because that's how small their brains are. This is not a right-wing position. This is biology.
I mean, is that not why we have juvenile system?
Yes.
Because if a child, let's say, and there are some kids there that are physically, I mean, they can go toe-to-toe with some 20-year-olds, you know.
Oh, yeah.
There's some really, I mean, you look at Mike Tyson when he was 13. The kid he was a fucking monster.
He was.
And he was, so...
He was. And so we have this, yeah. And so anyway...
So they can commit these crimes, yeah.
They can, but the thing is, at the end of the day, sure, they still, that young, making that kind of decision, I don't believe they're able to consent. And this activist swears blind that they can. Children can absolutely consent. And I'm like, okay, you don't understand what a forced choice is. You don't understand how this is all being manipulated on them. I'll accept that. But the fact that you think that kids that young can consent to something that life-altering completely ties in with all the other decisions that put an 11-year-old kid in front of gay men at a bar. It's this really fucked up worldview that somehow completely defenseless kids can be treated as adults. And it's like, that bothers me deeply. Like, fundamentally, this is wrong. Like, we are not designed like this, whether you believe in creation or not. This is not how we are designed to operate. So it's like... And that's ultimately what I got in trouble for. Yeah. I got called a transphobe over trying to deny trans kids the right to live as they want. And I'm like, dude, I'm not denying that. I'm just saying give them a chance to grow up first, you know. And even there are actual gender dysphoria cases. It's a thing that exists. And if it exists and doctors agree with performing the surgery or whatever needs to be done, the HRTs, the whatever, sure, do it. Absolutely get the medical treatment that you need to feel like a real person. I have nothing against that. Just not kids. That's the.
I mean, yeah.
Am I
Like, I have a
insane?
laundry list of stuff pre-18-year-old me would have definitely said or done, and I'm like,
Yeah.
fucking serious. Pre-21-year-old me, are you
Yeah.
fucking? So you're now
Yeah.
putting this on, and that's kind of why, even in a religious context, I like the concept of confirmation, where at least in the Anglican Church, where you basically, as a kid or at a certain age, have the choice that you're like, yes, I want to be a member of the church now, like, because up until then, it's just what you've been
Yeah.
fed by.
And it's like even there, you've got the whole like Catholic tradition of baptizing a couple days after birth, and you're in the religion. Even that is fine because you're not fundamentally altering the characteristics of the person. You're just, inducting them into a belief, which can be changed later. So I'm looking at this and going, there is something so fundamentally disturbed about this. It's like it's almost as if there's this epidemic of untreated mental illnesses that have managed to network and form into a movement because none of this shit strikes me as healthy. It just doesn't. I'm sorry.
I mean, children they cannot understand the gravity of the situation.
They can't. And this is borne out by one of the best trolls in history, Milo Yiannopoulos. Do you remember Milo Yiannopoulos?
Oh, that was like peak 2014 internet.
Yes. Do you remember how he got taken down?
It was his comments about how he lost his virginity.
Yep.
I think.
So a video surfaced where he essentially defended pedophilia, saying it was normal for younger children to be groomed and have sexual experiences with older men because that was part of the community. And his argument was he felt like this is how you get into the gay community, and it's fucking not. It's child abuse, by the way. But
thanks for setting the gay community back 20 years, Milo. I mean, I'm old enough to remember that this was precisely the sort of thing that gay rights activists were fighting to fight the image off of.
Yes. But then, and here's the thing that happened, right? So he went through that experience at a young age. He contextualized that as normal. Years later, he defended it, and that was the first time he got pushback that told him, no, dude, you were raped. That's what happened. You were abused as a child. And so there was like a Sky News thing where he kind of apologized, and then he kind of vanished since then, but I definitely think this rattled him. And he was like, shit, actually, now that I have context, I understand this is wrong. And I can honestly say that I've been through a similar situation. When I was 13 years old, 3 or 4 times in a year, like no sex was involved, don't worry. But what basically happened was I ended up alone, 13 years old, taking a bus from Bloemfontein to Lusaka and back 3 times in 1 year. 13 years old, alone, Joburg bus station. Picture that scenario. I went through that because of parents that just have absolutely no concern for their kids. But also, for years, I thought of that as normal until I pointed this out to someone and they were like, no, dude, that is completely unacceptable. You cannot do that. And that's when I recontextualized it and realized actually that was a sign of extreme parental neglect. The fact that they would just send a kid that young from Bloemfontein through Joburg, through Zimbabwe, to the Zambian border.
That is, wow.
I know. I went through that. I survived. Nothing happened. I wasn't touched, groped, abducted, none of that shit. Which is like really...
That is shocking, though. That is legit miraculous.
Yes. And that's, I mean, like, that was me going through border control Zimbabwe on my own, like 3 times in that year. So, like, that was the situation. Now, I had no feelings about that until someone pointed out, this is extremely risky behavior. And that recontextualized it for me as well. So I speak from experience that you cannot trust a 13-year-old to make a huge decision about their own lives. It's just not a thing you can do. Anyway, I think that concludes the therapy portion of the show.
But I mean, that's why I say, like, even adults, like, if you've been indoctrinated for long enough in a certain way of thinking, be it political, religious, whatever, like, you can talk to somebody who's fully indoctrinated for long enough. If their world, if they've normalized this, then that's where I sort of run into the hard ground with other libertarians who are like, well, Stockholm syndrome people, and they consent to their captors. That's why I say, like, consent alone is not enough. Even if they are old enough to consent, we really need to figure out, can this person really actually consent? Are they really getting it? Because they could be so indoctrinated that no matter what rational argument you bring them, it takes time for that shit to seep out of their brains for them to see, no, this is...
And again, that takes a very long time. I mean, I myself diagnosed clinical depression 2010, and I'm still kind of dealing with it all this time later. It takes a very long time to undo stuff that was ingrained in you as very young. So for this Desmond, 11-year-old gay bar performer, his parents just fucked up the rest of his life. And when he reaches like 25 years, he's going to realize what was done to him. And I wish him the best of luck in recovering, because that's that's a rough thing to get over. So anyway, it's just, I call me an alt-right fascist. I don't think kids younger than 13 should be able to consent to life-altering surgery before they've gone through puberty. Call me crazy, but I'm fine with that position.
No, I'm with you. On
I have very few lines in the sand. That's one of them. Call me nuts. Okay, we should probably talk about some tech, because that was kind of depressing.
Well, you want to go in on Apple fucking up monumentally on their FaceTime?
Oh my god! And that was like,
since we're talking about kids and all that, let's talk about them in a positive sense. Let's talk about the 14-year-old who's the world's best tester in the world, because he found a bug that all of Apple's developers apparently missed.
It was a kid who I know there was a family who found it. Was it the kid who actually like...
The kid initially found it when he was trying to call his friends, and then his mom... And okay, do you want to set this up, or should I?
Yeah, let me do this. So first off, the context is really hilarious, because this comes like a week or two after Apple had a huge conference when they had a billboard up, what happens on your phone stays on your phone. They're like, huge privacy push, and then this breaks, which is really funny. The bug is basically, if you try and FaceTime someone and then you turn that into a group call before they've answered, it'll play their audio whether they've picked up or not. Meaning you can effectively force the conversation to activate before they've accepted the call, and that's a huge bug. I didn't know it was a kid who found it, but I know that was how the bug came about. It's actually quite amazing.
Okay, I mean, from a programming standpoint, you're telling me, and I haven't confirmed this, but I'm hearing reports now that Apple actually knew about it a week before it went out, and they still...
Yeah, you know what?
You're telling me Apple doesn't have the programming capacity to put all hands on deck to fix a bug that monumental?
It took them a week, I think. They roll out a patch to disable the feature, and then I saw recently they rolled out another patch to actually fix the bug. What bothers me, and I said this like within a few months of Steve Jobs' passing, I said Apple is dead. From this point forward, they will roll on as a consumer company. They'll make a lot of money, but the core of the company is gone. And there's a video that came up recently, like young Steve Jobs giving an interview about how product people need to be at the center of a business like that. Otherwise, it gets taken over by sales and marketing. And that's when the company's spirit dies. And his whole thing was, they recruited the product guy from Pepsi at the time, like the early days of Apple. And he was able to do his best work at Apple. And he's describing modern day Apple. There hasn't been any serious innovation from them in the last couple of years. But Steve Jobs was, like the rumors were, he was such a perfectionist that for every major release of OS X, huge parts of it would be rewritten from scratch every time, in order to make sure that it was the best possible software for the hardware. And it's only after Jobs' influence washed out of Apple, you start to get these weird fucking bugs. Like there was another one where you could dump out the entire system keychain in plain text, for instance. Huge security bug. Would never have flown in Jobs' Apple, but somehow it just came up. So it's like, Apple's like the next Microsoft. That's what happened now.
So you called it. You hit it right on hit the nail right on there. And from a programming perspective, this is such like a school. You know when they say that schoolboy rugby errors. This is first year programming errors. This is my first Hello World programming level errors. Because I mean, without even going into the specifics of the syntax of it, and I'm gonna be that asshole.
Do it.
Who says, make sure you have proper access levels on all your objects so that shit like this does not happen. How hard is it to, let's say, if you spin up, let's say, a FaceTime object, how hard is it to set the privacy levels there properly? Like, have like an is accepted value. And if it's not accepted, then you can't switch on the audio of that phone.
I imagine it's probably a thing where they create the media stream before the call accepts, so that the moment you accept, it's there. Otherwise, there's like another 1 or 2 second delay.
And
But they,
isn't that blaringly bad as is? Like you create the
probably,
stream before. Like
but
nobody saw that as blaringly bad?
it was probably fine for as long as the other bit of code checked that the other device didn't start playing back the audio until the call was accepted, and that's what got taken out of the picture. So it's like, yes, but the thing is, that sort of shit is caught with like aggressive user testing and aggressive code reviews, neither of which Apple seem to be doing anymore. They're fucking up in ways that they shouldn't. So hectic. But yeah, hilarious though, just for a company who's like, what happens on your iPhone stays on your iPhone. Yeah, unless it's FaceTime, dude. In that case, fucking nothing saves you.
I know a million girlfriends that will be group FaceTime calling their boyfriends every time they're just out with the boys.
Yeah. Oh, dude, no, that was rough.
So many dudes and thoughts are getting busted with that bug. I'm surprised you haven't seen spicy stories about that already.
It is, you know what? It's possible that like nobody really picked up on this bug before it was announced, and then they patched it to turn it off. So the damage might have been limited, but still, that is just amazing. All right, I think there are other tech topics. Like we're almost up to an hour here, so I think we could do one more.
I mean, we can briefly discuss something else, like I don't know, maybe possibly finally getting 5G.
Dude, no. Have they auctioned the spectrum yet, or what were they supposed to do to make that happen?
Well, the tests are done in as far as I know, they did tests on 3.5 gigahertz spectrum.
Yeah.
And they set up and it seems to be working out in our unofficial 10th province, Lesotho. So that's
yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Vodacom launched it there. There's probably like 2 towers to cover the whole country. Like
that's why I said our unofficial 10th province, Lesotho.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's crazy. They've got 5G and not much else. It's quite amazing, actually.
Dope blankets, though. I've literally just created an international incident in those last 3 lines of conversation. But anyway,
yeah, let's not try to start any wars yet. We're not there yet.
It's not my fault that Sotho people are just knockoff Tswanas. Like, let's be honest.
Guys, I don't want to get into a race war here. I'm Irish. I've got nothing to do with this. Just opt me out. How do I unsubscribe from this conflict?
Okay, that is as spicy as I'm gonna get. But yeah.
Knockoff Tswanas. Jesus, dude. There is actually, and I do want to touch on this just as a reminder that we are topical, and this is actually merits a whole conversation of its own. But there will be a resolution next week that we can actually talk about in detail, and that's the please call me thing.
Oh yeah.
I think next week is good because apparently it's going back to court now. Vodacom has signaled that they're willing to go back to court, and Makate is like very upbeat about his victory, and I'm like, dude, you're gonna get hosed. But let's discuss the hosing next week. But like just briefly, what's your take on the please call me situation?
Okay. Let's highlight this, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So what was the actual? It depends on each person's shall we say view on what the value of intellectual property and actualizing that intellectual property is, right?
Sure.
I can think of a shit hot idea, but if I don't actualize it, it's worthless.
So that's the one thing. The other question is what intellectual property was actually developed, because he claims please call me. Other people claim it was missed call, and there was like all this noise around what did he actually create, or and the summary.
Let's I mean, for argument's sake, let's say his idea was please call me, totally him, all that. Yeah. Did he code it? Like what was his agreement with the employer? Like, because until you have that, then you can't take a solid stance, and that's why I'm very careful. Even now about taking a solid stance on this. Like,
so the thing is, it's relatively easy to take a solid stance here because of the way Vodacom screwed up. But look, I develop applications for a living. I know for a fact ideas are worthless until they're executed. And like NDAs and shit to protect ideas are just a profoundly bad idea. But Vodacom...
Did he develop it? Did he develop it, though?
He didn't. He didn't write a line of code, no testing, no nothing. But, and this is the but that has screwed Vodacom over for the last 20 years, there was a verbal agreement from the head of product development that McCarthy would get a cut of the proceeds from his idea. That was the fuck up. The moment Vodacom did that, they committed themselves to paying him something, and then they never clarified what the something was. And they just let it roll for 20 years. That's what eventually went to Concord. And the thing that nobody seems to be talking about, and this is like as fundamental as land reform, the fact that Concord upheld a ruling that said that a verbal agreement was binding in that sense, that's crazy, because up until this point, it's like writing or GTFO. This is verbal and circumstantial, and the Concord still upheld it. That is insane. And like, it's amazing that this is not the thing we're talking about. Rather, it's just McCarthy and his 70 billion claim. Vodacom isn't even worth 70 billion, so I don't know how they're going to pay that. Although I'd love to see them try.
$1 billion. Dr. I see he went to the Dr. Evil School of Economics and ransoming.
70 billion. And
well, maybe if they get that 5G network up working through the whole of South Africa, then maybe it'll
and then
actually work.
All 10 people who can afford whatever they're insane. Because also,
hey man, Slay Queens have got to stream their Instagram in 1080p. How else are they going to do it if without 5G?
Is 1080p the number of penises watching at any one time?
Oh! Snap!
Sorry.
Snap!
If you're going to call it Slay Queen 1080p, that's the first thing.
Slay Queens decimated.
But also, so just FYI, another little bit of tech news related that slipped through the cracks a little bit. ICASA has finally published a whole bunch of regulations involving data and mobile data and all the rest. They've ruled that you have to be able to roll over bundles, you have to deliberately opt into out of bundle, and you have to be able to transfer unused data over the network just like airtime. Those are all really profound changes to the way data bundles work.
Those are huge changes.
Huge fucking changes. I think all the operators have like a month or two to implement this. So this is going to be interesting. I think it'll be a net negative at the end of the day, but we'll see how it pans out.
We shall see.
I can't wait for all the Slay Queens to be like, send me data. You know, like that's going to be a thing that happens now. Send me megabytes. But it's like it's airtime and data bundles now. It's just going to be data. So
yeah.
Like pro tip, take advantage of all those big data bundle special promotions and then just hand out little bits of data as you go. It's the new currency. Damn. All right. So I just want to close out with a couple of announcements. First one, and the one I'm looking forward to the most, we've got a WhatsApp voice note line now, just like a real radio station, which I think is quite a stretch.
Except unlike CBS, we're not going to cut you off for no reason.
Although we do reserve the right not to play what you send us.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
Like if you start like shouting like blood and soil, kill all the brown people in a voice note, we're not going to play that shit. Like, come on.
Unless if you play it and then mock you mercilessly for it. So
yeah.
So the number is 071-308-9802. It'll be put on the Twitter feed, the website, all the rest.
I'll probably tweet it a bunch of times as well.
For sure. So send us WhatsApp voice notes. We'll go through them every week, and if there are some interesting ones, we will play them. So questions, comments, funny stories, deep-seated admissions of guilt, whatever.
Please don't send us sects, because the first thing is sexy pics. The first thing is Wogan's going to see them first. That's my gripe. I don't get to see them first.
Yeah, there is actually no good way to do that. Although I do solemnly promise to forward any good ones to you if they come in. So,
okay, that's fair then.
And then second one, just a reminder that we do have an active Discord server on which we play games pretty often. We've recently added a music bot so we can play Highway to the Danger Zone during epic last-minute Overwatch payload defense runs.
Payload Wait, did we just win? Yeah, we did.
Highway. So yeah, that link is on noscriptshow.com. You just can go there and join our Discord server. We banter like this all week long too. Plus, that's where the memes are.
Us the people on Discord server.
Exactly. So I think that's it. So next week, not that we're planning this explicitly, but I think we probably should do next week live. because I'll be traveling, and doing like an old school hangouts would actually be pretty fun if we can get like a guest involved. Do we have any names that we can float as potentials?
Well, Marlene Yako volunteered to be on our show, so there's
Nice.
that.
And I think like the topic will be STEM and education, which are two of my favorite things. So,
Well, I mean, she's published more papers in a week than I have in my life. So, and you're a better commercial developer. So between the two of you, I would be completely useless in that conversation.
is it like a third wheel situation sort of thing?
Yeah. I'm bringing in my own like replacement there. She's like, yeah, she'll replace me pretty good and solid. So, yeah.
So, and
Or who knows? Who else? Maybe we'll get like some like alt-right type on the show. That could be fun.
I don't know if I want to spend the whole show pointing out how wrong they are. Like, I don't know if I'll have the energy.
Oh no, I don't mean alt-right. Alt-right, I just mean like alt-light, like Roman Kabnak or something.
Alt-light. There's nothing light about what that man does. Let's be honest.
No.
Yeah, I think that is all from us for this week. Thanks for listening, and do subscribe everywhere. We're on iTunes, Spotify, and SoundCloud.
Please subscribe to our channel, or else I will die. Please subscribe.
He's not joking. His heart rate is literally kept alive by the incoming subscription notifications. To save a life. That is what's going on here.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Have a good week.
Cool. Cheers.